Hey everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to check this video out. Today, Reagan and I are going to give you a full walkthrough of our new dive watch line.
So Ryan's going to start things off with a general overview of features that are shared across all of the Vaer divers, both the D5 USA assembled variants and the D7 Swiss Made. And then after that, I'm going to jump into a little bit more of a specific look at the unique dial variants and kind of give some feedback and some thoughts on, what set those apart. And that should kind of do it for today.
Alright, I'm going to walk you through the high-level overview of our dive watch line. Reagan and I have been working on this watch over a year now on the design specifically, and thinking of the watch and thinking of the designs for even longer than that. It's definitely been an incredibly exciting thing to work on. As a wristwatch brand owner, you sort of only really get to wear the watches that you produce. And so while we love our field watches and our standard case designs, we were each sort of itching to wear something new, and a dive watch was the perfect solution for that. So dive watches are beloved in the watch world. They're just really the perfect tool watches. They're made purely out of function. Each component, each part of the design is out of function. You have that depth rating for usage in water. You have a unidirectional bezel so that you can keep track of time if you are diving or in any other activities. You generally have a dark dial with really bright lumed indices or numerals, and that allows you to quickly tell the time. They're just awesome machines. Everything about them is fun. Everything about them is interesting. If you love design and if you love the technical aspects of products, a dive watch is really something that's very fun to dig into. Starting with the case, the cases for our dive watch are 39 millimeters. We went back and forth quite a bit on the case size. We were discussing anywhere from 37 up to 42. We really looked at our existing line, which is mostly 40 millimeters, and recently released a 36 millimeter. We found 39 to be a sweet spot for the dive watch, so that it's not cumbersome, it fits perfectly, it has a great profile on the wrist. The bezel of the watch is actually 40 millimeters, and so you get that 39 millimeter case. It's not overbearing, but that 40 millimeter bezel still gives it a really nice masculine stance on your wrist. Now, one of the big highlights of this watch is the case design. We integrated lyre lugs into the case, also known as twisted lugs. These are really elegant, really beautiful lugs. They have a very nice, soft, twisting side profile. Most dive watches on the market today, you'll find a pretty flat, bland case side to the watch. These lyre lugs are really incredible. They're just soft, they're silky looking, and they're not only aesthetically pleasing, but they're also really great for usage. Because there aren't a lot of sharp edges across the watch, they slide really easily and nicely under a wetsuit or under a shirt sleeve. Now, obviously with a dive watch, water resistance is incredibly important. The name is dive, which is in reference to diving in the ocean. They're originally tools used by divers and scuba divers to track their time underwater, and in order to do so, they needed something that would be safe at depth. And so for these watches, we chose a 200 meter depth rating, 20 atmospheres, 20 bars. Now our standard line are all 100 meters depth rated. We're very confident in those watches for usage in water. They do great for surf, swim, and shallower diving. In this case, these 200 meter water resistance watches are completely guaranteed in any diving circumstances at all. They have a gasket sealed crown, and they have a heavy duty gasket sealed case back. Now, some dive watches out there will use 300 meters, 500 meters, 1,000 meters. It's completely unnecessary, honestly. We are a utilitarian brand. We want to give users what they'll need and what's useful without compromising other features. Well, we could have gone for a higher depth rating, 300, 500, 1,000. It wouldn't bring any practical benefit to our users at all, and it would have required us to make the case thicker, and it would have also required us to raise the price. Both of these would have just been completely unnecessary because, again, other than the label of a higher depth rating, once you get past 200 meters, there just is no functional So onto the crystals on the watch, and I say crystals because there are two crystals. There's a front sapphire crystal and a back sapphire crystal. For the primary crystal, it's a double domed sapphire crystal with internal AR. We chose to go double domed on this model because with a double domed crystal, there's actually zero distortion at any angle. In the case that you were to be using this watch diving, that means you can view it from any angle and you'll be able to see the watch, see the time, see the hands moving, see everything you need to. Now, in addition to that double domed crystal on the top, we have a sapphire crystal on the case back. We also, we discussed this quite a bit. We went back and forth on it. We just think that mechanical movements, automatic movements are a beautiful thing to behold, and it's a shame to cover them up. So we did leave those open. We did use a sapphire crystal. It doesn't at all affect water resistance. It's still completely rock solid. And so we're really excited that you'll be able to see the movements on each watch. Let's talk movements. So the movement is the heart of the watch. It's literally what makes the watch tick, and it's an integral part of ensuring that the watch is built to perform well and perform well for a long time. So this is a super special watch. Obviously, we put a ton of time into it, and ensuring that we choose a good movement for it was integral. For the base watch, we chose a Miyota 9015 or 9039 for the no date version. This is a fantastic movement. It's a tier above the Miyota 82 series and the Seiko NH35 series, which are used pretty frequently. This movement's thinner than that. It's upgraded and more modern, so it has a higher beat rate, and it's just generally a better performer. So we wanted to make sure that at the very least you're getting that fantastic movement that will perform well and keep time well for a very long time. For the more premium model, we wanted to offer a Swiss made version. Some people really do care about that Swiss heritage, and in that case, it's going to be an ETA 2824. Also a fantastic movement. It's sort of the workhorse of the Swiss movement world. High beat rate, 28800, very thin as well. For that one, we give these really beautiful blue screws. It's just something to behold. Again, a part of why we did that sapphire case back. Now, obviously with a watch, the primary function is timekeeping, and so accuracy is going to be important. With all of our watches, we're having them regulated to -5 plus 15 seconds per day. This was a pretty big step for us. It's obviously an extra added cost, but again, important that the watch getting to you, getting in your hands, is going to show up accurate and keep time well. Now, at Vaer, assembly origin is something that's pretty important to us. The core of our line is assembled in the United States. Most of our watches are assembled in the United States. In this case, the D5 line, which includes the Miyota 9015 movement, is assembled in the United States. The D7 line, which includes that ETA 2824 movement, that's going to be assembled in Switzerland and get the Swiss Made tag. One of the most common questions that we receive, and one of the things that watch lovers and watch nerds love the most, is Lume. This is something we spent extensive time on during this design. We tested a variety of different Lumes, Lume paints, Lume compounds, layering of Lumes. We pretty much settled on the best. For all of these watches, we're going to be using Swiss Made Super-luminova X1 grade. This is the highest grade. They claim that it lasts 60% longer than standard grade. So again, really excited for this. We put a heaping portion of X1 on every single watch, and this is X1 grade Lume on the bezel pips, on the dials, and on the hands. So you can be very confident that the Lume is going to glow incredibly bright. Again, one of our favorite features of this watch, and something that we're really excited to get into our owner's hands. Another pretty cool and interesting piece of this watch that Reagan and I got to design is the bezel insert. A bezel insert does not exist on our standard field watches. In the dive watch, it's the component placed into the bezel that allows you to track time and keep time with your wristwatch by turning the bezel. Now, for bezel insert, there's a few different options. There's stainless steel, which is sort of the traditional, most affordable option. Two of the more premium options that a lot of brands are using are ceramic and sapphire. There was also a pretty heated debate on our end about which of these two component types to use. We did end up settling on ceramic, and we're very excited for that. It's an incredibly strong material. It has a beautiful sheen to it, and it's long lasting. Now, another thing that we're really excited to release with this watch, and something that we've been asked about extensively, is a stainless steel bracelet. Now, people really care about the intricacies of bracelets. There are a lot of different components and pieces and ways that you can make a bracelet. So we really believe we did a good job meeting the needs of those who want a very premium bracelet. So we'll start with the end links. We used solid end links with quick release spring bars, so there are no need for tools. Those solid end links are form fit to our case, so they have a really beautiful, nice fit. The bracelet's made out of 316 stainless steel, and it tapers from 20 millimeters to 16 millimeters. Now for the clasp, we chose to use a dive style clasp. We debated between dive style, deployant. We found dive style to be the most reliable. Deployant does have a tendency and a possibility of popping open more easily. The dive style is solid. That dive style will have a Vaer engraved logo on the clasp itself.
Alright guys, now for the second part of the video. Hopefully you enjoyed that comprehensive review of all of the awesome dive features. Now, if you've reached that point where you're thinking, hey, this sounds like a pretty cool watch, now the tough part, deciding which of the models is best for you. So I'm going to go a little bit more, and again, all of these models share all of the specs, all of the capabilities that Ryan just talked about. I'm really just going to be diving into kind of personal preference things, more aesthetic aspects of the designs, but I mean, those are obviously just as important. So without further ado, let's get started. So let's take a look at the Pacific design. I have one version here on my wrist and the other here in my hand. The interesting thing about the Pacific design is that it was actually the first one that Ryan and I came up with when we were initially prototyping and coming up with the dream that would eventually be the Vaer Dive Watch. So that should give you some context of what it represents, in the sense that in many ways it embodies the larger dive project, which is that it's vintage inspired but technically savvy, kind of appeals to both the collector as well as maybe the first time dive owner, and something that kind of covers the bases. So for that reason, I think it really is at the center point of our entire design lineup. I think there's a lot to like. Maybe it's not as maybe contemporary as the Atlantic design, or as not quite as avant-garde or eye-catching as the Tropic design, but it's a really nice balance. The other thing that's kind of distinctive about it, or obvious about it when you look at it on the wrist, I've been looking at this one all day, is it has the largest indices of any of the dive watches, and that really pops. Given that ratio, the dial only takes up about 30 millimeters of space. Dive watches have smaller dials, so the size of these indices are really taking up a lot of space, particularly on the Pacific White. What that means, that's a lot of luminescent paint. And that's if you are a Lume freak, I think I would definitely point you in the direction of this is going to be a good model for that reason. But it's also just very eye-catching. I think the play between the indices and the bezel works really, really well on the Pacifics. The other thing that's important to keep in mind, and kind of a nice feature of this design, similar to the Arctic model, is that you're going to have the option of two different colorways. Down the road we may expand many more colorways for our divers, but this is an initial and a very important kind of experiment for us as a brand. So we wanted to stay relatively safe, while also giving customers a little bit of variance in terms of that taste. And within the diver, those two color options, both for the Arctic and for the Pacific, are going to be choosing leaning into the more retro inspired, the original design, which is kind of that tan or old radium colorway, or something more contemporary, more modern, which would be just a pure all white. The white also having that benefit of being very color coordinated. You can throw any color strap on a black and white watch and it's going to pop. This is pretty darn compatible. The tan looks great. It's very subtle. It's going to look great with a lot of colors, but maybe it would clash with this, an orange strap, for example, if that was what you're into. Okay, so the other thing that's really distinctive or important to point out regarding the Pacific design, and I already kind of touched on this, was just the size of the indices and the way that they are positioned relative to the edge of the dial. Unlike almost all other Vaer watches, which give a very small, maybe about a millimeter gap, typically we use that gap to put in, the American assembly or the Swiss made text. In this case, the indices go right to the edge. And what that does, given the kind of the indentation on the double dome sapphire glass and kind of that arch dome, is it kind of creates this interesting optical illusion effect when you're looking at it on the wrist. It's really quite cool, where it seems like those big indices like go on forever, and that's really neat. Like when you're looking at it, you're like, where does the dial start and the bezel stop? So it's kind of a fun thing, and actually something that I've noticed more recently as I've been wearing it, around the house. All right, next up is going to be the Atlantic design. The way I like to describe the Atlantic is as the anchor for the entire lineup. And what I mean by that is it really has, I think, the most mass or broad appeal. You could call it the safe bet, and it probably is. It takes less design risks than the Tropic, for example. But I think that's also can be a real positive, particularly if you're shopping for someone else, maybe as a gift, or you're new to dive watches and you don't really know the direction you want to take your collection in. This is an awesome starting point, and so it's kind of exciting in that way. The other really important thing to keep in mind if you are kind of considering this versus some of the other models is the date function. So this has that 6 o'clock date window position. Along with the Tropic, it's the only watches in the lineup with a date. So if you want a date and you don't want kind of that more avant-garde look of the Tropic, this is going to be a really, really solid bet. The other thing that's kind of important to note, and again, as you can kind of tell from these descriptions, there's commonalities between watches. Some share these features, some share that. So it's pretty much going to come up to personal preference as well as just aesthetic taste on which one's best for you. But the other thing to consider, an important consideration for the Atlantic, is along with the Arctic model, it's the one with the most raised indices. All of the hour indices, all 11 of them, the 6 o'clock is missing, are raised indices, which mean that there's basically more space for the X1 Lume to sit in. So again, a great option for a Lume freak that really, really should create a fantastic glow. So you're gonna be really well covered there. But the other incredibly important aspect of the Atlantic model is that it's available as both a D5 Vaer Diver as well as a D7 Vaer Diver. What that means is it's available both as a US assembled model with a Miyota 9015 movement, as well as with the Swiss version, which is what I'm holding, which is the D7, which is with an ETA 2824. I think that's really important. We've seen that with a lot of our Vaer customers over the years. Just having that choice. It's a price point thing, but it can also just be, what does a watch mean to you? What does this particular watch mean? You might be a guy who already has 10 Swiss made watches. What's another one on the shelf? So maybe the American assembled aspect is kind of a unique selling point, or maybe you're that type of person that, Swiss made obviously has a cachet, it has a certain meaning in the watch industry, as well as, there's really no comparison. The ETA movement with the exhibition case back is really incomparable. It's absolutely stunning. You hand this watch to a friend, a colleague, or girlfriend, whatever it may be, and even if someone who doesn't know that much about watches is going to pick this up and say, wow, that looks like a $5,000, $10,000 piece. I think that's really what the Swiss made, the ETA really communicates that. Granted, it's a $700 piece, but they don't need to know that, right? So anyways, that's a good summary of the Atlantic. And so next up is going to be the Tropic design. And I would say really to me it's kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum of the Atlantic design, which I described as an anchor. This is more like a flag, at the top of the mast pole or something like that. It really calls a lot of attention to itself. And that's a good thing for, I think, a lot of people. It's exciting, it's different, it's definitely been popular. Ryan and I have been really surprised at the support that this one has received. Why is it unique? Well, it's fairly uncommon amongst dive watches to use a two-tone coloring on the dial. It's not something that's seen that often. Most are either, you know, solid black, solid blue, whatever it may be. The integration of cream, you know, it's just unique. It's kind of fun. It's a diver. Obviously it has the bezel, but it doesn't quite look like a diver. So for, you know, I think for more serious collectors or people who already have a pretty diverse lineup, have the bases covered, this is going to kind of create a unique niche within that lineup, particularly with that American assembled feature. The other way I've described the Tropic design, even from our own internal perspective, is a bit of a gamble. You know, we put a lot of unique pieces together. We're hoping they would turn out. And one of those unique pieces is this custom date wheel, which alternates between red and black. That's definitely been done before, but we think it's kind of fun, or just kind of an inside joke, I guess, with the company, is we, rather than choose, you know, red and black, just alternating like a normal roulette table, ours goes in increments of 4, so you have 4, 8, 12, 16, and so on. So I don't know if that means that those days of the month are going to be good days or bad days, but you're definitely going to notice them, because you're going to look down at your watch and you'll be like, oh, my date window is now red. So I think it's kind of fun, and you know, it's almost like a little secret between you and your watch. That might be cheesy, I'm not sure, but anyways, that's the way we're thinking about it. Again, I think we're just a really fun piece. The other aspect, you know, I think just I speak to Lume because I know it's so important for so many people, particularly when it comes to dive watches, is this one, it actually does have one applied indice. It has a triangle indice at the 12 o'clock. But, you know, that said, it's obviously not going to shine comparative to some of the other models like the Pacific and the Atlantic. For that reason, it does have X1, but it's painted, you know, most of it is actually painted directly on the dial. The positive of that is it has one of the more unique, like kind of the Lume profiles of any dive watch, definitely in our lineup, and probably, you know, across, you know, other brands as well. And I think it's kind of fun to look at for sure. It has this, you know, there's just a lot of Lume, a lot of stuff going on, and you're kind of like, what watch does that guy have on his wrist when you're looking at it at night? So again, really fun. I'm really excited and really happy with the way this one turned out. And yeah, I think that, you know, people, regardless of, and I think, you know, those that backed this project and those that supported the Tropic design are going to be really, really satisfied. All right, guys, last but certainly not least, we have the Arctic design. Now, the first thing you should know about the Arctic is it's actually our most popular dive watch to date. So if you're the type of person that wants to have the it item and the thing that, you know, that's flying off the shelf, the Arctic would be that model. One of the reasons why it's been so popular is it's available in 3 different variations, which is actually more than any of the others. The Atlantic is available in 2 variations, as well as the Pacific being available in 2 variations. The Arctic being available in 3, obviously that kind of creates more opportunity and more kind of choice of picking exactly the exact watch you want. Those 3 options being what I have here in my hand, the D5 Arctic, which is the USA version. Right here it's on the steel bracelet, and you know, that's available in the tanned colorway. The second option being the Swiss Made D7 version, also in the tan with the ETA 2824. And then the third option being another version of the D7, which I don't have with me today, which is the Arctic White colorway. And that's a great option, again, if you're, you know, you like the design, but you maybe want something a little bit more modern and contemporary than going into this kind of more retro tan look. So that said, the most popular model across all of the lines is the D5 Arctic with the tan colorway. So this is number 1. Again, if that's all you need to hear, then you can just go right to checkout. Let's look at some of the other things that kind of set the Arctic apart and are other reasons why you might want to consider it, other than the fact that it's just really popular. First thing to talk about is the raised indices. The Arctic design has 12 raised indices. All of the indices are raised, which, you know, adds obviously value in terms of having a strong and powerful luminescent, but it also, I think, you know, regardless of the angle of the watch is displayed at, it creates a sheen. You get that light playing off of the steel on the dial, and it creates a really luxurious and a really high quality look. the Atlantic being kind of your other option there if you love the raised indices. It has 11 rather than 12 because it has that date window. The Arctic is not available in a date, and it very likely will not be available in a date, so don't hold your breath. If the date window is something you really want, then I would highly recommend choosing the Atlantic for that reason. The other thing to point out regarding the Arctic is that, unlike all of the other models, it has two kind of special features. Both of them are kind of references to kind of some of the design inspiration for the watch, which I'll talk about in more detail in another video. But that would be one, the Gladiator style hour hand, which I think looks absolutely fantastic. It's more prominent than the hour hand on the other dials. It has a kind of more character. It does have that more retro feel, but again, I think it works perfectly with this design. The other thing, the numerals on the Arctic model are slightly differentiated. They're still retro inspired, but they're slightly differentiated from the other models. If you like them, great. If you don't like them, then obviously you're gonna wanna look to one of the other models for your choice. Those are the kind of the main things. Again, it's mostly aesthetic. That's the other thing to kind of keep in mind across all of these models. You know, the Arctic may sound, you know, more technically capable than the Tropic, for example, but, you know, it's really just the naming convention. Granted, those names kind of are related to the aesthetics and the idea behind the design, but you know, you can take this bad boy scuba diving in Belize, and you can take the Tropic, you know, crab fishing off the coast of Alaska. It really, there's no connotation to that. It's not like more of a durable outdoor watch. They're all equally capable. Most of these differences, again, are all aesthetic. The other thing to mention, and it hasn't really been brought up much in this very long video, it is the customization available in the straps and the bands. You know, so this is the D7 Arctic on my wrist here on the nylon quick release strap, and then I have the D5 on the bracelet. Does that mean I can't get the bracelet on the D7? Of course not. All of the straps you've seen throughout this video, you know, maybe you saw one variation or one combination that stood out to you. The good thing is that, you know, we offer that ability to pick and choose your straps at purchase. All Vaer watches come standard with two straps. For the dive watch, the primary strap for every model is going to be a black Tropic strap, which we think kind of fits this design perfectly. It's comfortable, it's functional, highly waterproof, and it's also kind of retro inspired, which matches the kind of the design of this lineup. But beyond that first Tropic strap, which, you know, is kind of your standard, all of the straps you've seen are available, included with prices of purchase, with all of these options. So if you want the D7 with the bracelet, you can have it. If you want the D5 with the nylon khaki, you can do that as well. So really, you know, it's all about customer choice. It's all about added functionality. The idea being, you know, we think each one of these watches, regardless of which model stands out to you, represents exceptional value. Truly, you know, exceptional value. And you know, it's not just, you know, looks. You hand this watch to someone who's wearing a Submariner for 10 years, and they're going to be blown away. They're going to really not believe you when you tell them how much you paid for it. I think that pretty much does it, guys. I appreciate the patience. I know this was a long video to get through. Hopefully you found some sections of it helpful. You know, we threw this together as quickly as we could as soon as we had, you know, assembled pieces on hand. So there may have been, you know, some things that we weren't able to fact check. If that's the case, you know, we'll kind of review this. I'm sure that, you know, someone will bring this up in comments, and please do let us know if something's confusing, if there's kind of a disconnect between something on site or on an email and what's in this video. But yeah, do please follow up with questions, comments, and, you know, just general feedback. We'd love to hear it. You know, this is our first step in the dive watch. This is our first dive watch we've ever made. We're excited to continue making more and more and more. So, you know, tell us what you think of the designs. Tell us what you think we should do next, and we'll be really excited to hear from you. For more information on the diver, kind of stay tuned to this channel, or honestly just sign up to our email list. We'll have tons of updates in the weeks and months ahead. Thanks again, and have a great day.